We discussed previously the halacha of waiting after meat before eating dairy. Let's discuss now question in the reverse. What do you do when you eat dairy and then you want to have meat afterwards? Do you have to wait in between? So on this issue, there's also a discussion in the Talmud and in the commentaries. The halacha, the way that most of the commentaries paskin, the way that most of the commentaries rule, is that one does not need to wait in between dairy and then eating meat. Again, the reasons we mentioned about eating meat do not necessarily apply here. If having meat stuck in between your teeth does not usually happen for dairy. And the strong taste of meat in one's mouth also does not necessarily apply in most situations for dairy. And therefore the halacha, as accepted, is that one does not have to wait. However, what the Gemara and the commentaries discuss is that perhaps one does have to perform certain other activities in order to actually be able to eat meat after dairy. And that includes really three different things: kinuach, hadacha, and then rechitza, or washing your hands. Kinuach and hadacha are not clear exactly what they mean. Today, the way that has been accepted is that kinuach means that that one has to wipe themselves, and essentially the concept here is, well, I guess we'll discuss all three together. Kinuach and hadacha and the third thing are essentially as follows. We have to rinse out one's mouth when eating dairy, in order to make sure that there's no actual dairy residue in one's mouth afterwards. So that's done with two different types of things. You need to do this with liquid, some sort of liquid drink, which could be water or anything else, to rinse out one's mouth. And number two, it also has to be done with a solid. Solid food would be basically any type of solid food, including bread and anything else, with the exception of green vegetables and flour and dates. Those are the three things that the Shulchan Aruch says are not going to be helpful or effective in rinsing out one's mouth, and therefore anything else would be sufficient to rinse out one's mouth with the salad. And as we mentioned, also the hadacha, actually, that would be the kinuach, would be the salad, and the hadacha would be the liquid. The third thing that one needs to do is to rinse off one's hands. And this is not so clear exactly what the parameters are. In the times of the Shulchan Aruch, it was suggested that one should rinse off one's hands. But if you can look at your hands and see that they're clean, it seems that that would be sufficient as well to make sure that you don't have any residue left on your hands from your dairy meal that you may put your hands into your mouth during your meat meal. Today, it's pretty accepted that most people do wash their hands, even if they look at their hands, just to make sure that perhaps you don't have some sort of fatty residue on your hand that perhaps you can't see so well. And therefore, the bottom line today is that we practice all three of these things. We rinse out our mouth with solid, as well as with a liquid, as well as wash our hands in between meat and dairy. That's the accepted practice by most people. There are some that have an additional chumrah, an additional stringency to wait between dairy and meat, and this may be based on the Zohar. The Zohar seems to say that perhaps one has to wait 1 hour in between dairy and then meat. So that's the custom of some people, and that is mentioned in the commentaries to the Shulchan Aruch, and the Shach, the Sifsei Kohen, and a number of others mention this concept. There is an additional custom today, which is to wait 1/2 hour, 30 minutes, in between dairy and meat. And this custom is a little bit more difficult to locate the source. It's not clear exactly where this came from. So certainly someone that does not have this family custom, it doesn't necessarily make sense to start. One that does certainly can continue. It's not bad to wait additional time in between dairy and meat, but it's certainly not required according to the mainstream opinion in the poskim, in the halachic commentaries. When it comes to eating a second meal, so this actually is relevant for some people on Shavuot, when people start their meal sometimes with dairy and then they want to eat meat during the same meal. There's a custom of eating dairy on Shavuot. There's also a halacha that one should try, according to many opinions, to eat meat on Yom Tov, on the holiday. So there's a question, if one wanted to do both in the same meal, which some of the commentaries mention, does one have to actually recite Birkat HaMazon in between the two? And this is actually a debate among the poskim. The Mishnah Brura in the halacha of Shavuot actually says one does not have to wait, and one can simply finish their dairy and immediately start eating meat afterwards upon performing the three things that we mentioned previously. And others, quoted in the Darkei Tshuva, suggest that perhaps one should indeed recite Birkat HaMazon after eating dairy, before eating meat. There is one exception to the rule that we should mention, and that is the exception of hard or aged cheeses. And this exception originates from the Maharam of Rothenburg. He discusses, at one point he felt that this was not necessary, and then he found one time that he had pieces of cheese left over in his teeth after eating dairy, and he got very scared, and he decided that he should wait 6 hours after eating cheese. Today, the way that the Ramah accepts the opinion of the Maharam is that for hard or aged cheeses that have a very strong taste, the custom, at least for Ashkenazim, is to indeed wait 6 hours, like meat, after eating these kinds of cheeses before eating dairy. It's not clear exactly what's included in these types of cheeses. The Shach suggests anything which has been aged for 6 months. And this is essentially the ruling which is followed today by many of the poskim and the kashrus agencies, that aged cheese, which today may include Swiss cheese, perhaps cheddar cheese, and Parmesan cheese, one may have to wait 6 hours according to the custom of the Ramah, at least for Ashkenazim. And again, today there are many different kinds of cheeses. Those are the main brands that are accepted, at least in the United States and other places, that one would wait 6 hours. For in Israel, there are some poskim that say that even melted cheese and maybe even other yellow cheeses and pizza cheeses also may be included in this category of waiting 6 hours. But there are other poskim that disagree and say that those are not really the same types of cheeses referred to by the Ramah. Those are regular cheeses, and those cheeses would be basically the same rule as regular dairy. There's no extra strong taste of those cheeses that would require 6 hours, and that's generally the custom which is followed by many, that after eating pizza or other regular kinds of cheeses, one generally does not wait 6 hours. One simply washes out their mouth with solid and liquid and washes their hands, as we mentioned before, without waiting 6 hours.